Hey guys, good morning and welcome to the Potter Podcast. And I'm excited to talk to you about a topic today that, quite frankly, I've been having with a lot of people, especially in this market. And I think it's something to discuss. And hopefully that tagline there might have made you think about it a little bit and go, what is he talking about? And the title of this podcast is there a clearance section in real estate? And what I mean by that is I think a lot of times, especially in this market and especially with investors and people that are out there, a lot of times they're coming up to me and they're saying, hey, are there any good deals out there? Can you find me a good deal? And it made me think about the clearance section, right? When you go into like a clothing store or any other store, if you're like me, I don't ever buy anything at retail price when it comes to like my clothes and my shoes and all those types of things. I walk straight back to the back of the store and I go right to the clearance section. And that's just how I roll. I very rarely will buy something for retail price because I know that I can probably find something the same quality, if not better, on the clearance rack that's going to be way cheaper. And so it made me think about, do we have that in real estate? Like, do we have a section there that we can go and we can find a good deal? And there's many different ways that I can go in this, but the direction that I'm going to head today is the fact that when you think about clearance, right, and you think about, well, let's go back to that retail story here for a minute, and let's think about this as we think about a clearance section. What allows something to go on to clearance, right? Like if something's brand new and it comes into the store, you're sitting there and you're not actually gonna see that product go to the clearance rack right away, right? Like, no, that's gonna go to the front of the floor. It's gonna go and be advertised as like the new thing, the next thing that's coming out, or if you're in different seasons, you might see some of the winter stuff start coming out in the fall, and you might start seeing some of the spring stuff come out towards the end of winter, and so on, right? Like we start seeing that trend. And so it made me think about, well, how do we know then what goes to the clearance and what doesn't? And if you think about it, like it's usually those things that get phased out, right? Like, so we're going into a next season. We're obviously not going to have winter clothes that are going to be on the racks up front when it's summertime. And we're obviously not going to have something that we've ordered a lot of still be out in the front when no one's buying it, right? And so we're going to send it to the back. And so it made me start thinking about, well, is there anything like that ties into real estate, right? And I would say yes and no. So let me clarify this and kind of go into detail here on this one. I think, in years past, we saw a lot more houses on the market, right? So years past, it was more of a normal market, fair market, not so much of this low inventory stuff that we're seeing now and that we've seen really in the past, 6, 7, 8 years. I'll be completely honest, since I've got into real estate, which this is going into my 8th year, which is kind of crazy to think about. But you look at a lot of this stuff and you, when I take a look and see what the real estate market has done, like ever since I've got into the real estate market, it has been literally somewhat of a seller's market in all these different pockets. Now, are there some areas when I first got in of different price ranges and things like that weren't necessarily in that seller's market? Absolutely. But overall as a whole, and the clientele that I was working with, it was a lot of a seller's market. And what I mean by that is there wasn't a lot of leverage that the buyer had when going to buy a house. Now, if you fast forward back to, 15, 20, 30 years ago, it obviously wasn't like that, right? Like a lot of the times when you look back at the trends and see different things, like you see that the buyers had some leverage, right? The buyers could come in, they could see what the listing price was, and then they could go and they could offer less than the listing price. And in some certain circumstances, like I'm talking about, you could get a sale, right? Like you could get a good deal. You found a house on clearance, right? Like this house was listed for 6 months. It was listed at this price, and I was able to offer this, and the sellers took it, right? Like you were seeing that back in those times and those days and years ago. Fast forward to today, and you don't see that at all. And if you do, it's very rare. And typically what happens in those situations is in this market today, if you find a good deal, like a good deal isn't a great deal, it's more of an average deal. Sometimes you may find something in the rough, but that's typically a lot of the agents that find that stuff, right? Because they know someone or they hear of someone that is going to list their house. They know it needs work. They know it needs some of these other things, but they have a buyer where they're like, hey, you know what? I actually have a buyer that could come to the table. But in that case, a lot of times you're not going to get anything less than what that seller wants. The seller is going to name that price, and they know that it can hit the market and it can go over that price in some cases. And so you're going to have to give them what they want. So when it comes to like finding something on a clearance rack or a good deal per se, like as it relates to our market and real estate, that is hard to come by nowadays. And so I say these things because this stuff has started transitioning and happening. I think the first question we need to ask is, well, how did this happen, right? Like, how did this shift take place? Well, first of all, it wasn't a shift that took place overnight, right? Like we've been seeing this over the years. And like I said, the last 8 years in real estate, like you've gradually started to see this trend. You've gradually started to see these things happening where you started seeing less and less houses on the market. Well, why is that the case? Okay, so let's back up and let's talk about why is that the case? Well, I think there's a lot of things that fall into this. One is if you're in a city that is constantly growing, such as Omaha, Nebraska, and you're seeing the growth and everything take place, you're starting to see people move here from the coast, from different areas because they can't afford it, and they're moving to a more affordable area. And so you start seeing this trend of people coming from the coast and other places and other cities, because Omaha is known, and it's in the Midwest, for being a place where, being able to afford housing and live comfortably is the secret that now has been out. We don't have mountains, we don't have oceans, but in turn, we also don't have, these high prices on a lot of these bigger homes and things like that. Like for what you can get for the amount of money to a lot of people surprises them when they get here. And they're like, I can get how much square footage for how much? It like surprises them a little bit. And so I think you've got that, but like also with that, you've got other big companies that start moving into town, right? And so you get like a lot of these big companies that start moving in. Well, when those companies move in, they're going to hire 1,000 plus people. And so now you've got to find 1,000 plus homes for a lot of these people. And so as the city begins to grow, right, you start seeing this trend of the housing market and the shortage of the houses that are on the market continue to start to decline, because as you start seeing that increase and then you bring in another big company, that increase has now leveled off and then starts plummeting down again, because as houses continue to come up on the market, you have all those people come in and then you see it plateau and then you see it start going back down again. And that's what's making it difficult to find more houses or to see more houses coming onto the market. The other thing that I will say that is not new, but I think it has become another avenue. And obviously, as you look at statistics and you look at what people are investing in, real estate is the number one thing people are investing in. And so now you add to the mix a lot more people that are aware of the possibility and I would say really the best option to get a return on your investment and to start cash flowing money. And so you start seeing people buying up a lot of these cheaper houses and fixing them up and then renting them out and making money off of that. And so that's the other trend that has been happening. And a lot of times, honestly, those are some of the people that are like, hey, I need you to find me a really good deal. And I literally just have to look at them in the face and say, there's no such thing as finding a good deal anymore. Because at least in our price range, the only way that I'm going to find that is going to be talking to somebody else that I know or that has something coming up on the market. But they ain't going to sell you that house for less than what they want for it. Okay, like, and less than what's going for it, because they know that the moment they put that thing up on the market, it's going to have multiple offers, especially in that price range. And this is the price range that I'm talking about when it comes to, like, we're not talking about $600,000 houses here. We're talking about anything from like $85,000 to, you know, $200,000. They know that if they put that house up in that price range, at least in our market, you know, they're going to get a lot of traction on it, despite what the condition and some of those things are. And so that's the thing when I say you're not going to find a good deal anymore, is because that's the reality. That's what's basically taking place in this market. Now, does that mean that this is going to stay this way forever? Not necessarily. Does that mean that this can change or shift at any given point? Absolutely. Like, there's things that can affect that and get it to change that way. But I will say this, as far as the trends that we're seeing, me personally, I don't see any of that stuff happening anytime soon. So if you're someone that's out there and you're wanting to invest in real estate and you're wanting to find a good deal, just know that I'm going to set the expectation for you right now that you're not going to find a good deal. Now, does that mean that by paying over the asking price that it still isn't a good deal for you? Well, that depends. I mean, what depends on a good deal for you? Like, what's that definition for you right now in this current market? I would personally say this. I would say that if you're buying a house and your plan is to rent it out, a good deal would be wanting to make at least a 1% return on that. So, for example, if I buy a house for $120,000, I would want to make sure that I'm going to get at least $1,200 of rent per month from that property. That would be, in my opinion, a good deal. Now, there's some people out there that are teaching that, like, oh, you need to do at least 1.5% or 2%. That would be great. Yeah, that would be great, but that's not the reality. At least not here and in our market. So that's just me being real with you and being upfront and saying, you know, you need to be careful with who it is that you're listening to and who it is that you're taking advice from. Because if you're getting your advice and your opinions from somebody else that's not even, for example, in the state of Nebraska for me, or even in the city of Omaha, like, I would say, like, throw that stuff out. There are going to be some things that you want to apply, but they don't know what the market's like here. And I would say the same for anybody else listening that's in a different city or a different state, is you need to know what that market and what the industry is doing in your specific location and in your area, because there's a lot of things happening. Like, for right now, like, I could tell you, I've got a lot of friends that are out in California, and I've seen this lately, is there is a lot of people moving out of California. And most of that is because of, you know, them losing their jobs and things like that, but also the cost of living is not the greatest. And we've known that, right? And again, some people chose to do that because they wanted to live in California, but they're now starting to see that, like, hey, for the amount of money that I'm going to spend in living in a house, I can almost double or triple that what I'm paying in California with a really nice place here in Omaha, Nebraska. And so people are starting to see and starting to look at numbers and trying to make what works best for them, and then making decisions. Like, if I was living in California, would it be difficult for me to move to Omaha, Nebraska? Absolutely. Like, you know, but you weigh your options, right? Like, if I'm living in California because the weather, and that's the main reason I'm there, then I know that I'm going to pay more, right? Like, I'm going to pay more to enjoy the weather, right? If I'm moving to Omaha, Nebraska for the weather, which I think you're crazy if you are, but let's just say you were, like, you know that, okay, I love snow, I love the different seasons. Like, some people have told me that they love the different seasons and things like that. And that's, for them, you know, the best option for them to move here and to enjoy that, and then also to live comfortably financially. And so like it's one of these things where you have to weigh out, what am I willing to pay, and what am I willing to sacrifice in order to be in specific areas. And I think a lot of people are saying, well, I'm willing to pay more to live here, or I'm willing to pay less knowing that there's going to be a different change in climate and different things like that, but I'm going to get more for my money. So again, it comes down to personal preference there, but let me jump back onto this whole clearance thing. So again, I want to state that like it's not impossible to find those things, right? Like we find those things for our clients, but it takes time sometimes to be able to find those things. So patience is key when you're thinking about that thing. So if you are someone that's wanting to invest in real estate, I would say don't budge on the price that you want to spend. Okay, like if there is a price in mind that you're like, hey, this is what the average person is paying in rent, and I know I need to stay in this ballpark figure, and that's what makes sense for you, then I would say stay there. Like stay there, be patient. It may or may not come. Like that's the thing that you have to be okay with too, is this may or may not come, but if it does, I'm ready to jump on it. And so that's the thing that I want to say there. I also kind of want to speak into this because I think a lot of times people get the wrong impression. I'll hear people say, find me the perfect home. And this would be our perfect home. And they start listing out like all this stuff. And I have to immediately tell them that, hey, there's no such thing as the perfect home. And what I mean by that is you can build a brand new house, and a month, 2 months later, 3 years later, you can basically find that there's things that you wish you would have done differently. And I say that because I'm speaking from personal preference. Like we built almost 3 years ago, and we're still having conversations about, man, I wish we would have done this. I wish we would have changed this. I wish we would have added this. All these different things, right? And so what I mean by that is there's no perfect house, right? There's always going to be something you're going to want to change or add or take away or whatever the case is. So get that image, that saying, that motto out of your mind, and understand that there's always going to be something to do with the house, okay? So yes, are there things that like you want and you're not going to budge on some of those things? Absolutely. So if that by definition would be a perfect house for you to find those things, great, we can find that. But moving into a house, especially an existing house, moving into it and expecting it to be perfect is going to be almost impossible, especially in this market. And so again, if that's something that you're willing to wait for, then wait, go pay rent for another year or two and see if anything changes. But I am telling you now, now is the time to still purchase a house because of the appreciation that is taking place. And so when you also look at that, you also have to look long term, right? And so yes, you may be overpaying for a property right now, but 2, 3, 4 years from now, you might be able to look back and say, how much is my house worth? And then you again tie it into this conversation is, man, I got a good deal. I found it on clearance. Yes, I paid a little bit more for it. So technically you didn't find it on clearance with like a price tag, right? But looking back 4 years, 5 years, you might actually say like, hey, our house is now on clearance. We got this thing at a good deal if now it's worth this much. And that's the trend that we're starting to see, is the fact that like when you purchase, yes, you may pay a little bit more today because of the low inventory, but 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road with appreciation rates of 3 to 7% on average here in Omaha, like that's a good deal. Like that's going to be a good deal without you having to do anything to the house. That's a good deal. Now, obviously, if you do updates and stuff, that can obviously build more equity into that house, but that's the thing. Last thing, and then I'll go, but this was a conversation that I was having with one of my clients now, and we got under contract in July this last year to build a house. And we are now into March, actually, but while we were having this conversation, we're in February. and we're following up with a builder and they just have the foundation in. They don't even have framing up or any of that stuff. We were supposed to be completed by April, and now it's looking more like July or August. And that was frustrating at first, right? It was like, well, this is unacceptable. This is, I don't understand why it's been taking so long. Obviously, you had COVID and you had some weather and some other things, but there's no way that should have pushed your completion date back like 4 months. But as we started talking this out and as we started looking at pros and cons and different things, I said, listen, you're making out with more money in the long run on this because you got locked in at your price with this new construction. They're paying the taxes on the lot. They're paying everything right now until you move into that home. So they're actually losing money every single day that something doesn't get done on that property. So to be honest, what they would want is for you to be frustrated and upset and walk away, because then they could go back and they could resell this property for more. And so I told her, I was like, listen, all we need to do is be patient and sit on this. Yes, it's a little inconvenient for you, to be sitting here and waiting another couple months to get into your home. But look at all the equity that you're going to have into your house once you move in. And so I was explaining to her that this doesn't happen very often. So in this case, I would say that she did get a good deal, and she might have found something on clearance here without this deal not closing on time, because she is basically building equity into her house every single day that this house is not closing. And so I know that's been another trend and a lot of things happening here in our market right now, especially with new construction, is a lot of stuff is getting pushed back. And a lot of people, if you're going to meet with them right now to build a house, they're telling you like 10 to 12 months before completion. I would say you're probably leaning more towards a year. Somebody that I talked to the other day said if you come into our office and you sign a contract today, we're probably closing at the end of December and pushing into 2022 already. And so like that floored me a little bit, but I also thought like, well, hey, these guys are gonna get locked in at a price, and then they're gonna automatically just be building equity into that place because the prices are gonna continue to go up. With the way construction costs are increasing on a weekly basis, you're building equity into that house right now. Like I know when we built, our builder told us, like, if you would have started the build now, your house probably would have been $30,000 more. And so even just knowing that, of like, wow, that's how fast and how quickly like that equity can build. That's one thing to be thankful for with this market and as it continues. Does it suck from a buyer's standpoint sometimes? Yes, because you're getting into multiple offer situations. But also once you get into that house, it's also something to celebrate, because you know that moving forward, you're going to be able to constantly and quickly build that equity into your home. And so for those people that have bought houses, like 6-7 years ago, you might want to be thinking about or reaching out to your realtor and saying, hey, what's our house worth right now? Because it might be worth a lot more than what you think. And if that's the case, and if you've thought about moving, this would be a great time to do that, because you're going to get the most equity out of that house. Excuse me. And then you're going to be able to take that equity and then go put it down on a new house. And potentially some of you might be building or wanting to build, and that might give you the option to do that. So yeah, there's just a lot of stuff happening, and very quickly, okay? And I stress this all the time, that if you're looking at buying or selling a home and you're not gonna use an agent, that's ridiculous right now in this market, especially because you're gonna need to know how to navigate through a lot of this stuff right now, because there is so many things in this industry and in our market right now that are changing on a daily basis, so if you're working with an agent who's not in the business daily, I would highly recommend looking into getting somebody else that knows exactly what's happening every single day. For us, like, we're putting stuff under contract on our listings and with buyers every single day. And so like you're basically getting to see the trend, right? Like we may not get every single offer that we're writing up on, but every single day, like someone from my team is writing up an offer as they're working with buyers. And so like we're seeing the trends, right? Like we're seeing, okay, here's how aggressive our offer was and we lost out, and we're reaching back out to that listing agent and saying, hey, what could have made our offer win in this situation? And then we get that feedback and we come back to the team and we share it. And so like every single day we're discussing how we can improve and be more aggressive with our offers as we're working with buyers. And then on the sell side, we're also talking about what are the offers that we're seeing that are coming in, and what did your sellers agree on. And some of these things are, like, in my mind, outrageous sometimes, where I'm like, how in the world are we seeing things go for that amount over? One of my agents came into the office yesterday and said, I basically figured out this solution when I'm going to write up. And I said, what's that? And he goes, well, I find out how many offers there are and I multiply that by 2. And that usually tells me how high I need to go on my escalation clauses. And I was like, man, that's kind of crazy. So he's like, for example, if there's 5 offers, I know that I got to go at least 10 grand over the asking price to even have a chance at it. If there's 20 offers, there's a good chance that thing's going to go $40,000, $30,000 to $40,000 over the asking price. If you've got 25 offers, which he did on one of his homes, it went for $53,000 over the asking price, waiving all contingencies. So like you can see this trend as it's happening there. So again, is it possible to find something in real estate that's on the clearance rack right now? I would say it's highly unlikely based off of what we're seeing and based off of all the offers that we're able to track and gain feedback from as we write and as we represent our sellers. So I just wanted to put this out there just to give you guys an idea of what to expect, at least now and moving forward into the near future. Again, can some of these things change? Sure. And if they do, I'll be the first to get on a podcast and share those things and what we're seeing. But this is why you need to get an experienced, knowledgeable agent who's in it every single day, because they know what's happening, they know the trends, they know what to do to at least put you in a position to have an opportunity or a chance to go get that house that you want. So with that being said, I know that this one was a little bit shorter than the previous, but I just wanted to do a quick one just to give you guys an update on what is happening in our market, what to expect, and to get the information straight from us and the source. So with that being said, I appreciate you guys. I'm looking forward to continuing to be more consistent with the podcast and staying in touch with you guys. So stay tuned for the next episode coming up later on this week. We'll talk to you soon.